Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be. Welcome. My name is ZolaLuckyStar, and I'm continuing reading. I think we're on chapter 4 now. The book is called Healing the Divine Art. It was written by Manly P. Hall. Manly P. Hall is very interesting. He references work from all over the world in many different sort of spiritual disciplines. Some of it's ancient Egypt, Thoth, Plato, Aristotle. I mean, he covers a lot of ground. And he's definitely, I would have to say, really learned in the arcane, the mysterious, obscure information understood by a small group of initiated people, and definitely the occult. Manly P. Hall is one of, if not the most important esoteric historian and philosopher. He also studied astrology. He's recognized as a 33rd degree Mason. He had a protege whose name was Georgia Lambert. And in 1934, he founded the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles. So yeah, if you want to learn more about him, look it up. But yeah, let's continue. All right, so yes, we are on chapter 4. It looks interesting. It's entitled Healing During the Rise of the Christian Church. All right, and then underneath that, he's got the titles of the different chapters. Evil demons in the healing arts. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Sainthood only through proved miracles. Galen and Avicenna, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, it's spelled Avicenna. The plagues of the Dark Ages. Mumie, the gum from gummies. Try that again. Mumie, the gum from mummies. Our great misfortune to be born. Obedience to doctor and to God. The era of witchcraft. The devil fixation. The causes of plagues. Paracelsus, the mystic doctor. The Protestant Reformation. The parting of the ways. End of the Christian ministry of healing. Sounds interesting. I'll try not to gag at some of it. The Christian ministry of healing is founded in the words of Christ. I told you I was going to have a hard time. In the miracles which he performed, I have to interject, allegedly, considering that he's completely fabricated. Okay, that's just me being really horrible. Okay, I'll try not to interject. And in his bestowal upon his disciples of the power to heal the sick. The attitude of the early Christians on the important subject of mystical healing may be summed up in the words of the Apostle James. Quote, "Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him." The Epistle of James 5, XIV. What is that? 14:15. Of the miracles of Christ, the devout Alexander Cruden wrote, "Our Savior confirmed the doctrine which he taught by a train of incontestable miracles. They were so great in their nature, so real and solid in their proof, so divine in the manner of performing them by the power of his will, so holy in their end." I'm sorry, I just can't help it. This Christianity stuff makes me want to gag. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyways, I'll try to just read it, okay? "To confirm a doctrine most becoming the wisdom and other glorious attributes of God, and for the accomplishment of the prophecies concerning the Messiah, whose coming, as foretold, was to be with miraculous healing benefits, that there was the greatest assurance that none without the omnipotent hand of God could do them. End quote. Should any doubt remain as to the importance of miracles in the proof and justification of the Christian dispensation, these few lines are quoted from the Vatican Council, says Session 3, Canon 3.4. Quote, "If anyone should say that no miracles can be performed, or that they can never be known with certainty, or that by them the divine origin of the Christian religion cannot be rightly proved, let him be anathema." End quote. When the Church leaned so heavily upon miracles as proof of its divine estate, it fell almost immediately into a serious difficulty. Most of the pagan faiths, which flourished in the early centuries of the Christian era, could also advance miraculous happenings to justify an equal claim to divine overshadowing. To extricate themselves from this embarrassing situation, the early fathers had recourse to the second chapter of 2 Thessalonians, in which is described the man of sin. I have to interject, this whole bullshit about sin is actually just a program. It's like programming people. Anyways, who should come with lying wonders after the working of Satan. By various improvisations upon this theme, it was demonstrated to the satisfaction of the pious that all miracles not arising within the Christian faith were snares and delusions, originating with the devil and calculated to destroy utterly all who regarded them favorably. This solution invited disaster, for it stigmatized all non-Christian beliefs. I remember debating with, I'm interjecting, and I remember debating with this. She was a Mormon. She was my friend, and this was a long time ago when I was a kid. And she was always trying to convert me, right? And I used to get into these debates with her, and I would say to her, well, what about, the whole country of India, right? Like, they don't believe in Christianity, right? They've got a whole other thing going on for them. Like, does that mean that they're all going to hell? And she was like, yep. I thought, holy shit. I said, girl, that doesn't even make any sense to me. But anyway, yes. So this set, and I'm back to the book now, and set the stage for a vast program of religious intolerance. The devil became the ruler of 3/4 of the earth. The church had set itself the heroic task of fighting his power in the 4 corners of the world. I have to interject, problem, reaction, solution. Continuing, and, as might be suspected, non-Christians did not take kindly to the idea that they were worshippers of Satan, and, as the centuries passed, the inevitable consequences of these theological pronouncements were holy wars and crusades. In addition to various healings of physical disease and sickness, the Gospels ascribe to Jesus the power of casting out demons. He cast 7 devils out of Mary of Magdala, and in Gerasa he caused a legion of evil spirits to depart out of a man and enter into a herd of swine. Miracles of this kind justified the theological doctrine of demoniacal possession and strengthened generally the public belief in the reality and power of evil. It's interesting. I have to interject right there again, because I will actually agree with that. There actually is a reality and power of evil. And, I have encountered that, but I've also encountered the reality and the power of that which is good. Now, I don't want to get way off the topic here on the book, but I just had to pop that in there because, yeah. And I have to say that when this negative being was speaking to me, I have to say that, oh my goodness, the hatred and the contempt, and I mean just freezing contempt and just hate, like hatred, just radiated off of this thing. It was horrible. Okay, it was horrible. And then on the other hand, encountering a different being like Serapis, totally different energy, like beautiful, calm, peaceful, just lovely energy. So, this kind of stuff is real. And so, the people that are, what's the word? The ones that don't believe in anything, right? I can't think of the word right now. Yeah, they are skating on the surface of reality, right? And the reality is that, there really is the two different forces, let's put it that way. So, yeah, I will agree with that. There is a reality and power of both ends. Anyways, continuing. It was upon the authority of the scripture, therefore, that the medieval church made an extensive study of demonology, and the casting out of evil spirits became an important part of the healing arts during the Middle Ages. Now, this should be fun. This one's entitled, this is the first one, Evil Demons in the Healing Arts. As the various isolated Christian communities of the first 3 centuries were gradually drawn together into one great assembly, the historical church began to take form. I have to interject there. We're talking like the Vatican and Catholicism, right? Much of its symbolism and many of its rites were patterned after the pre-Christian religions of India, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. That's very interesting. He says much of its symbolism and many of its rites. Yeah, they also stole names and attributes and powers and so on, and split it in half and labeled half of it evil and the other half good. It's actually a very interesting topic. But at any rate, yeah, they definitely did borrow, if that's the proper word, but yeah, they definitely borrowed it from earlier Gentile, beliefs, let's put it that way. Yeah, so like they patterned this stuff from India, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Every effort was made to conceal this borrowing, but from the wider vista of present knowledge, the borrowings are evident. Christian doctrine of the canonization of saints, it seems to me, came directly from the Hindus, especially the Buddhists and the Greeks. Because of the importance of the saints in the religious healings of the church, it seems well to look more closely into this phase of spiritual tradition. I just feel like this part, he's really skating on the surface. He's not really, we'll see. But this is not to discount the information he's giving here. I mean, it's all quite valid, but you could go a lot deeper. That's all I'm saying. Sainthood only through proved miracles. In the early years of the Christian faith, canonization was performed by the local communities. This gives support to the belief that it was patterned after some already existing formula. In the 10th century, the Pope reserved this power to himself. Since that time, canonization has been an elaborate process, often requiring centuries. The servant of God who is to be canonized passes through 3 steps. He's first made venerable, and then, after further consideration and evidence, he's advanced and becomes known as blessed. If additional investigation proves his worthiness, he receives the final honors, and the word saint is placed before his name. Except in the case of martyrs, it is usual for the sanctified state to be discovered by miracles, performed in the lifetime of the saint, and further proven by his miraculous intercessions after death. And the candidate for canonization has been advanced to the state of venerable. At least 2 important miracles wrought through the intercession of the servant of God must be proven before he can be acknowledged as blessed. And 2 further miracles must take place through the intercession of one called blessed before canonization can be completed. One who is blessed may receive veneration locally, and prayers may be addressed to him under certain conditions, but only after canonization may he be appealed to by the whole body of the Church. The saints were important in the mystical medicine of the medieval Christian faith, even as in the Catholic Church of today. They were called upon selectively by those suffering from various ailments. Saint Apollonia was prayed to for toothaches, Saint Valentine for epilepsy, Saint Vitus for nervous disorders, and Saint Anthony of Padua for difficult childbirth. Charms bearing the likenesses of different saints were worn for protection. I'm going to interject right there. That's totally borrowed from, ancient Egypt and Greece. Okay. One of the most popular being the medals of St. Christopher, supposed to preserve travelers from the dangers of their journeys. And it's also kind of interesting to me because in the, ancient Egyptian and Greece, right, they didn't just wear medallions, right? They were using them, and yes, they would bear the likenesses of these different gods or whatever. And yeah, they could be worn for protection. They could be worn to help them with different dis-ease, like nervous ailments or whatever. Lots of different reasons, right? But one was also in order to help sort of set up a sympathetic resonance. And then during the night, when your astral body or your astral form leaves the body at night, it was hoped that it would help to draw you to that god or deity where you could get, pragmatic advice or help or assistance from them, like, for example, with healing, right? They used to do that. So anyways, I just wanted to interject that. Although the early church had an elaborate theory about sickness and healing by grace, it does not seem to have interfered with the secular practice of medicine. Many of the great leaders of the Christian faith, including St. Augustine himself, were physicians. So long as the medical practitioner did not become involved in some fine point of theology, the practice in whatever place was natural to his times. That's interesting. So long as the medical practitioner did not become involved in some fine point of theology? Oh, I see, because, you can't, debate. Is that correct? I'm not sure, but, they have to just follow the dogma without thinking, so there's no debate, like perhaps as Aristotle or, Plato might have done in his schools of learning. I think that's what he's saying. The book continues. It was well that the church did not further complicate the life of the physician. I have to interject. Yeah, it's very complicated when you have to study and listen to other people's, opinions and putting forth different theories and then debating the merits. It's much easier, I guess, to excuse me. Much easier just to follow dogma, right? It could be so complicated to have to use your intellect. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm very cynical, right? He was having trouble enough with the patron saints of his own profession. There was Galen to make things difficult, and later was Avicenna to make them more difficult, and then with the two of them, the confusion was worse confounded. Galen and Avicenna, I'm not pronouncing this right, I'm sorry. Avicenna, greatest of the Greek. Oh, okay, so maybe they were looking at other stuff. Pardon me. Let me see. Greatest of the Greek physicians to practice in Rome was Galen, or Claudius Galenus, born in Mysia, 131 AD. His fame in medicine won him the appointment of official doctor to the school of gladiators at Pergamos, the city of his birth. He attended several of the Roman emperors, and according to the Arabic tradition, died in Sicily around the year 201 AD. Excuse me. In anatomy, Galen is known for his persevering dissection on the bodies of animals, but he had no opportunity for a detailed study of human structure. In physiology, he was dominated by the four humors of Hippocrates and sought to correct their unbalances by medicines of sympathy and antipathy. Galen was much given to magical processes and put more faith in amulets than in drugs. According to Cohen, he's supposed to be the originator of the anodyne necklace, so long famous in England. So I just had to pause here for a moment and look up anodyne necklace because I didn't know what the hell is that, right? So it's got a couple of meanings here. The first one says a necklace, usually of henbane roots used in the 18th century, especially by teething children as a charm against illness. And then the second definition says an executioner's noose. Oh, anodyne for your pain, right? We'll just put you out of your misery. Yeah, that sounds about right. Avicenna, Ibn Sina, the Mohammedan philosopher and physician who lived from 980 to 1037 AD. Seems to me that this anodyne necklace might have had a different interpretation. Don't know. Because, I mean, it seems like he was, like Galen was, he died in Sicily around 201 AD, right? And those other definitions are from the 18th century, so, I mean, perhaps there was a different meaning. I don't know. Okay. So, Avicenna was a student of the writings of Galen and his principal interpreter among the Eastern and later the European nations. He added many opinions drawn from Aristotle and mixed with these considerable Neoplatonic lore and a great inspiration gathered from early study of the Quran. Like Galen, he had very little actual knowledge of the human body and its functions. Both Galen and Avicenna left voluminous writings, and their books became the official texts of the medieval physician. These priceless treatises were interminable volumes, rich in noble generalities and laden with philosophical discourse on every subject, from stomach ache to falling sickness, with occasional references to volcanoes. It's beyond doubt that the books of Galen and Avicenna retarded medical progress for hundreds of years. But in their time, there was neither recourse nor relief from their authority. It was the best that they had. Galen was medicine's god, and Avicenna was his prophet. Or Avicenna, or however it's pronounced, I'm sorry. The plagues of the Dark Ages. 1,000 years from the 4th century to the 14th is the period, usually referred to as the Middle Ages, with the first 600 years graphically designated the Dark Ages. It's pretty much of a mystery what happened to human nature and human progress after the fall of the Roman Empire. Really, Manly? I don't know about that. I think what happened to human progress was the Catholic Church, the Vatican. That's what happened. Sorry, I couldn't help interjecting that. Okay. All that can be said with certainty is that European civilization was in the doldrums for a millennium. Well, gee, I wonder why they were slaughtering every single spiritual, like high priest or high priestess or druid or anybody that had any kind of, occult knowledge, even wise women that were just like herb women, simples. That they used simples and they tried to ease other women in childbirth and stuff. All those, they were labeled witches. They were burned, burned at the stake or pressed. I was pressed for a witch during that time. I think it was around the 15th century. So yeah, and I can still remember what that was like, and it was horrible. Okay, so yeah, they got rid of all the intellectuals and so on, and they were herding people into barns and burning them, and I mean putting people to fire and sword and gibbet and so on while they were stuffing this Catholicism, Christianity down people's throats. Yeah, I wonder why. Why did European civilization fall into the doldrums for 1,000 effing years, I wonder? Holy crap, I can't believe, Manly, that you're saying this, like as if you don't know. The guy's a 33rd degree Mason. He knows. Anyways, yeah, so, like, I really like Manly P. Hall. He's got a lot of really great stuff, but every once in a while, and especially when it's really just when it comes to the church, he really just kind of, in other subjects, he'll dive pretty deep, and then when it comes to the church, he goes right to the surface, like, pop, and then he stays there, and he just gives you, like, the mainstream media account, I guess, if that makes sense. Anyways, yeah, the wisdom of the classical civilizations was lost. Yeah, no shit. Anyways, and not until after the Crusades did the minds of man finally shake off the inertia of these melancholy times. Okay. Many have asked, I'm interested to see what he's going to say. Many have asked if the Christian Church was responsible for the Dark Ages. So he writes, in some ways possibly, but in general, it was a victim in common with the rest. The pivotal cause seems to have been the collapse of pagan Rome, for with it passed the law and order of its time. Yeah, okay. That's a whole other subject. Okay. Red herring. Anyway, a second cause was the closing of the schools of Athens by Justinian in 529 AD. Yeah, I believe that would be Justinian, one of the Caesars, Justinian. He writes, the church may have been partly responsible for this, but the emperor himself was largely, Rome was infiltrated by Christianity, and once the emperors of Rome, or once that happened, yeah, he closed the schools of learning because it was like considered heretical, because it was teaching something other than Christianity. I mean, come on. Anyways, okay. Book continues. And then he says, but the emperor himself is largely to blame. Okay, so to me, that is like blaming the victim. Somebody gets mind washed, and then when they do something stupid because they've been brainwashed, the one doing the brainwashing says, oh yeah, well, you've got yourself to blame for that. Okay. H.G. Wells, in his Outline of History, takes another view. It is not perhaps true, he writes, to say that the world became miserable in those dark ages. Much nearer the truth is it to say that the violent and vulgar fraud of Roman imperialism, that world of politicians, adventurers, landowners, and financiers, collapsed into a sea of misery that was already there. Really? Well, yeah, I have a different take on that. But at any rate, Okay. The Wells analysis is thought-provoking, but it seems a little strange that a great cultural system, built up through thousands of years of human effort in a dozen highly civilized nations and able to survive the vices of imperial Rome, should have perished with the fall of a system of which it was never a part. The arts and sciences were not driven to Islam simply by the Roman debacle. Or was Rome Rome has always been, the imperial Rome before Christianity has always been painted as this horrible place, and it got civilized by Christianity, and I'm kind of wondering if perhaps it was actually highly advanced after all. Look at their aqueducts. Look, that it was a massive empire. I don't know. You know how like the one that the victor writes the history. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. I just find that might be a little bit biased there. Anyways, more likely an ignorant aristocracy took the place of a corrupt one. Always the beggar on horseback's first act is to persecute the learned. From the meager history that lights the Dark Ages, it would seem that a succession of plagues and fevers ravaged most of Europe. Yeah, and that was also by design. Anyways, these nearly always follow in the wake of war. The armies of Attila were stricken while invading northern Italy. Barbarians had broken up the existing pattern of life and brought nothing in its place. Men were wandering around hopelessly, spreading chaos and the plague. It's interesting that they say that, because actually there was also people that were caught like literally poisoning people's entire towns' drinking water. So seems like there might have been some agents wandering around out there doing stuff as well. It wasn't just hopeless men that had lost their homes and their families, Anyways, earthquakes added to the general misery and terror as whole cities vanished from the earth, and famine also swept the continent. The death rate was appalling. By establishment of the monastery system, the church did what it could to preserve the remnants of culture, but only such parts as were not in conflict with the dogmas of the faith. Okay, so actually what that says is the church did not do jack to preserve the culture. Okay, they forced their dogma of faith on the population. That's what actually happened. At any rate, yeah, it's funny, the real history of the church is totally glossed over, even by this guy, and he knows better. I know he knows better. Anyways, like I said, on everything else so far, and I've been studying his stuff, and so far that I've come across, at any rate, like it seems to me that most of what he's talking about is actually, on one level this is accurate, okay? Like, you can't deny it. On one level it's accurate, but that's kind of like the surface mainstream media level of stuff. And meanwhile, there's tons of stuff going on behind the scenes that he's not even talking about. Okay. It's like history for dummies. Anyways, let's continue. In the monastery libraries, the great texts of medicine, art, and music were preserved, together with many of the older sciences, such as mathematics, geometry, astronomy, logic, rhetoric, and the languages. These monasteries were virtually the only schools, and the clergy, with no worldly ties and with ample time for study, became the only literate class. And you know why that was, people? Because, the serfs and peasants and so on back then, the average people, they had to work. They lived in I don't know, they lived on their lord's lands, and they never probably everything was probably within like 15, 20 minutes of where they lived, and they never went anywhere else. And in fact, they weren't even allowed to. You had to have a special dispensation from the Lord of the Manor in order to travel. Had to be a damn good reason. They were not allowed to be taught to read and write. They didn't need to know that stuff. They were just there to work. So yeah, if you wanted your child to try to get ahead in the world, then they would send them to the monasteries, and they would become like monks or whatever. And so the most intelligent people that were left, because the monks took a vow of celibacy, the people that were the most intelligent never reproduced. So yeah, I wonder why they went through this down period of like 1,000 years. I don't know. I'm sure the church was totally trying to help them out. Continuing with the book. Okay, as the temporal power of the church grew, Europe slowly organized itself into the semblance of order. The Benedictines were the monastery builders, and in time they added schools to their holy houses. From these simple schools grew the great universities that were to become the pride of Europe. The church, so what that's actually telling you right there is that like the universities that we know of today were actually, probably still are today, I wouldn't be surprised, but basically whoever's running the Catholic Church, the Vatican, is actually the one that's dictating what is being taught in the universities and what is not being taught. That's what it says to me. Anyways, the church patronized the universities generously, and kings and princes followed its example. Yeah, because hey, if you want to control a population, go after their kids. And what's a university? Well, all the young people go there to learn. So, anyways, lack of knowledge was the primary impediment to the progress of these schools. 4 branches of learning were favored: belles lettres, law, medicine, and theology. To enter the universities, it was usually necessary to sign a statement to the effect that the applicant was a Christian. Over 20 years of age, a free man, not a peasant, and of good family. Oh, okay, so again, the peasants weren't allowed to partake of the higher learning. They couldn't get educated. So there was a 2-tiered class system, right? Anyways, not a peasant and of good family. Then as now, there was also a delicate financial consideration. The curriculum was impressive but sterile. Hooded savants on gilded thrones lectured or simply read from ancient authorities, and the students sat, listened, believed, accepted, and were overwhelmed but not informed. Thank you, Manly, thank you for at least saying that. Neither science nor the church was particularly to blame. There was no one who knew more to lead the rest to a better way. I have to disagree there. Anyways, the colleges of medicine were typical of the rest. They were grand and impressive necropolises, where somber professors mumbled over the dead tomes of Galen and Avicenna. Diseases were worked out by mathematics and remedies selected because the herbs themselves resembled the afflicted organ. Oh my God. Thus, toothwort was recommended for toothache, ivy for the nerves. That is quite the contrast to the great temples of healing that used to be before this Christianity thing took over. I mean, this is like a total regression from then. Okay, anyways, these were the times of the unicorn's horn and the bezoar stone. These moderns who liked to think of the church arguing for generations over the respective dignities of the three persons of the Trinity, might be interested in knowing how the doctors of that time were amusing themselves. Mumie, the gum from Mummies. The hooded and sceptered medics were wrestling with the momentous problem of the comparative medicinal virtues of the Arabian, Egyptian, Pisiphalatos, and Libyan mummy. The Arabian mummy was a gum that exuded from ancient bodies that had been mummified with aloes, myrrh, crocus, and balsam. Egyptian mummy was a similar exudation from the humbler dead, who had been preserved only with asphaltum. The Pisiphalatos mummies, highly recommended by Dioscorides, was made from the crystals found on the bodies of mummies embalmed with bitumen. But our authority notes how this is very difficult to secure, and it's extensively counterfeited by the apothecaries. The Libyan mummy was derived from bodies that had been swallowed up by Libyan quicksands and had not been embalmed at all. This delightful argument was finally solved by the discovery of a still more important mummy that could be made from the moss growing on the skull of an executed criminal. Thus went medicine in the good old days, when men feared the physician more than they did the disease. No shit. I wouldn't be going to the hospital. Hell, I don't even want to go to the hospital these days. Medieval doctors did not exactly burn the midnight oil in a consecrated search for new ideas in medicine. They were quite impressed with their own magnificence, smug and self-satisfied, and of a mind to murder any confrere whose originality threatened their composure. The prince, the priest, and the physician alike were members of closed corporations. They hung together for mutual support in times of trouble. So it's a bit interjecting, yeah. So, yeah, it sounds like a big club, and you are not in it. And when fortune favored, they pillaged from each other with a good conscience. In the heyday of the clergy, the heavy hand of ecclesiastical displeasure fell not on the physician, but on the astronomer. Men like Bruno, Galileo, and Copernicus could upset the Christian order of the world, for they stepped directly on the toes of the fathers who'd been taught that the earth was God's footstool, and that the whole mystery of creation had been worked out on this planet. When Copernicus stopped the sun and made the earth to move, he outdid Joshua, who only stopped the sun. The church acted against these men with all sincerity, but with a woeful lack of knowledge, to put these innovationists back in their place before they tore the universe apart. It does not appear that the early church made any general effort to limit the study of medicine or to declare against its practices. The church respected the doctor according to the authority of, I think that's Ecclesiastics 38, 1 and 4. Anyways, quote, "Honor the physician for the need thou hast of him, for the Most High hath created him. The Most High hath created medicines out of the earth, and a wise man will not abhor them." The church was the only institution great enough to demand common consideration from all the confused factions that made up medieval life. Unfortunately, the fathers were not health conscious. They honored the physician, but that did not inspire him to any general effort to improve the health of his world. To the extremely pious, the doctor was just another cross to bear. Yeah, in a world of pain and misery. In many instances, this attitude would be justified by the gruesome way in which the healing arts were practiced. Paracelsus cried out in the agony of his spirit against barber surgeons and barbarous doctors in these words: "Fortunate is that man whose physician does not kill him." I think we could cry out today for that too. Fortunate is the person whose physician does not kill him. Anyway, maybe I'm being really cynical there, but early Christian psychology shows how profound was the influence of the decadence and degeneracy of the Romans. So they really like to slag the Romans, don't they? I just keep thinking of those aqueducts that they built. You know, they can't build stuff like that even today. So, but the Romans are degenerate? Okay. Hey, you know, and some of it I think definitely was, but did it start out that way? I don't know. I don't know, I'm always a little skeptical. The debauchery of the Caesars, and hey, you know, there does seem to be some of that is justified for him to say, for sure. Anyways, the indescribable licentiousness of the aristocracy set up such a revulsion mechanism in the early church that it turned against all worldly things, including life itself, in an effort to preserve its followers from the evils of the times. Oh, okay. The church thundered its disapproval of the intemperances of the flesh, carrying its pronouncements to such an extreme as to violently disturb the normal patterns of living. I don't know, you know, is it possible that perhaps, you know, when the Romans were left alone and in the beginning there, I mean, if they were so decadent and debauched, could they have built those wondrous aqueducts and built an absolutely massive civilization, highly advanced, you know, and I mean, yeah, there's nothing wrong with being sensual and enjoying the fruits of your labors and having a good life, you know, and somehow that's debauchery. I mean, yes, yeah, I mean, there's examples in history of certain Caesars who were absolute, like they say here, indescribable licentiousness, for sure. But I have to question, you know, it seems to me that the early church, as he says here, you know, was against all worldly things, including life itself. And I think that that is definitely like the main thing to take out of that paragraph, because I think that that is true. Not because I think it's true, but it is. It is true. You know, I mean, think about it, right? Some guy on a cross that's dead and they're worshiping death. And, you know, drink of this and eat this thing and, you know, drink of my blood and eat my flesh. I mean, it's cannibalism. So, yeah, at any rate, you know, and then, you know, just the dumbing down of the population, forcing this program down. It's, yeah. They definitely violently disturb the normal patterns of living. The next chapter says, our great misfortune to be born. I mean, my goodness, like what, you know, and that's the way that it made people feel, like, I think, you know. Anyways, it says here, to the mind once set in a concept of sin, it's not hard to see faults in the simplest and most natural of habits and customs. Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And I got to interject there, you know, like this whole sin thing is actually like a mind control program, and it's done a hell of a lot of damage to people. In application, theology saw evil everywhere because it was thinking of evil. The world was regarded as corrupt in all its parts. The greatest misfortune is to be born into the physical state, and the greatest blessing was to die out of it on one's natal day. There you go. You know, they're worshiping death, right? It's an anti-life thing. Okay, coinciding with this religious viewpoint was the condition of the world itself. Men had Small hope of physical security or happiness during the Dark Ages. Certainly, life was a painful ordeal burdened with uncounted woes and hopeless to the end. Sickness and poverty were universal, and tyranny rested cruelly upon all. Those who were not carried away by disease or starvation died on the field of battle. Let's not forget, if they're accused of being a heretic, they can be like thrown into a prison or put into stocks, or burned at the stake, or pressed, or put in a gibbet to be made an example of for everyone else to look at. And they would leave the people in these gibbets until they were just bones. I mean, how disgusting. Anyway, it's little wonder in such an atmosphere a doctrine of corporeal misery and incorporeal bliss flourished. Yeah, I mean, you would be like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here, right? It was inevitable that men should dream of death as liberation, to regard it as desirable to leave this world behind. So like I said, the church is anti-life. In a sorrowing sphere, sorrow became the virtue of the hour. To the medieval Christian, it was dangerous to be happy, for joy might cause the mind to forget the sordid fact of ever-present temptation, and might also lead into actions which would result in sin. It seemed obvious that the longer a man lived, the greater would be his opportunity and temptation to make mistakes and commit wrong deeds. With his eternal salvation depending upon his faultless behavior in this life, the sooner he left the mortal world, the better. Wow. In addition to these negative considerations, the church advanced a very positive reason why it was not fortunate to live long. Oh, I wonder what that could be. Those who died in the faith of Christ passed to a better life. Where close to the noble saints and martyrs, they might be one with the legion of the blessed who had gone before them. One of the great authorities of the church, St. Augustine, wrote in a moment of rapture, "Oh, let me die, Lord, that I may behold thee." The church did not encourage men to hasten their ends by any unnatural means, as this would be contrary to the will of God, who has given to each the burdens that he must bear. Really? But the church certainly did not inspire medieval medicine to seek for unusual means of prolongating life. Under a doctrine which taught that all misfortunes were sent by God and must be borne without complaint and without sin, there was a completeness about things with no change needed and no correction. St. Alphonsus was a man of such extreme piety that Pope Pius VII desired to possess as relics the 3 fingers of his right hand. Oh, these were the fingers that held the pen with which he wrote down his inspired thoughts. St. Alphonsus lived to great age, but his health was always poor, and for many years he suffered his physical pains with patience and humility. His words are regarded as expressing the highest form of Christian teachings on such matters as health. "We must be particularly resigned," he wrote, "under the pressure of corporeal infirmities, and we must embrace them willingly, both in such a manner and for such a time as God wills. Nevertheless, we ought to employ the usual remedies, for this is what the Lord wills also. But if they do us no good, let us unite ourselves to the will of God, and this will do us much more good than health. O Lord, let us then say, I have no wish either to get well or remain sick. I will do only that which thou dost will." Now, and that whole will thing, that's a whole other program as well. But at any rate, we have pretty much reached the top of the hour, so I think I'm going to cut it off here, and we'll finish it up in part 2. Okay, so yeah, that's where we're going to leave it today. Thanks everybody for being here today. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. And we will see you back here again really soon. Until then, you take care out there, and bye for now. Bye, guys.